You've been the strong one your whole life, the reliable one, the one who shows up when everyone else disappears. But lately, you're starting to notice something disturbing. The people you care about most don't seem to get better. They just get more comfortable with you doing the work for both of you. And here's what hurts. You can't tell if they actually need you, or if they've just learned that you'll always be there to catch them. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from this. It's not physical. It's deeper. It's the fatigue of realizing that your compassion has become someone else's crutch, that your strength has become their excuse to stay weak. That every time you reach down to help them up, they grab your hand a little tighter and pull a little harder. You tell yourself it's love. You tell yourself they're going through something. You tell yourself that if you just give them one more chance, one more conversation, one more rescue, they'll finally stand on their own. But they never do. Because the truth you're avoiding is this: some people don't want to be saved. They want to be sustained. And you've been mistaking dependency for devotion. Think about the last time someone you care about had a crisis. You dropped everything. You rearranged your schedule. You talked them through it for hours. You offered solutions, perspective, comfort. You gave them everything they said they needed. And for a moment, things seemed better. But then, a week later or a month later, the same crisis returned. The same patterns. The same helplessness. The same late-night calls. The same emotional weight placed entirely on your shoulders. And when you tried to suggest they take action, therapy, boundaries, change, they had reasons why they couldn't. Not yet. Not right now. Maybe later. But in the meantime, could you just help them one more time? This is where you live now. In the space between their collapse and your intervention, you've become the scaffolding that holds up their entire emotional structure. And the exhausting part is that they've stopped trying to build their own foundation because yours works just fine. You feel it in your body. The tightness in your chest when their name appears on your phone. The dread before seeing them because you know what's coming. The guilt when you think about pulling away because what if they actually need you this time? What if this is the moment they finally break without you? But here's what no one tells you. The reason they keep breaking is because you keep catching them. You're not helping them. You're training them. Every time you rush in, every time you fix what they refuse to repair themselves, you teach them that collapse is effective, that helplessness works, that if they stay fragile long enough, you'll eventually do the heavy lifting. This isn't love. This is a transaction, and you're the only one paying. Let's talk about why this happens, why you, specifically, end up in these patterns, why your kindness turns into captivity. It starts early. Somewhere in your childhood, you learned that your value was tied to your usefulness. Maybe you had a parent who was emotionally unavailable unless you performed. Maybe you had siblings who needed you to be the stable one. Maybe you grew up in chaos, and the only way to feel safe was to become the person who fixed everything. So you internalized a belief: I am worthy when I am needed. And that belief followed you into adulthood. It shaped the friendships you chose, the relationships you stayed in, the people you felt drawn to. You didn't seek out healthy, reciprocal connections. You sought out people who needed saving because that's where you felt most valuable. Psychologists call this codependency. But that term doesn't capture the full weight of it. It's more than dependence. It's identity fusion. You've woven your sense of self so tightly into other people's problems, that when they hurt, you feel responsible. When they fail, you feel guilty. When they stay stuck, you feel like you didn't try hard enough. This is the trap. You're not rescuing them out of compassion. You're rescuing them to avoid the terror of being unneeded. Because if you're not the helper, the fixer, the strong one, who are you and the people you attract? They sense this, not consciously, but on some level, they recognize that you will tolerate what others won't, that you'll stay when others leave, that your boundaries are negotiable because your fear of abandonment is stronger than your need for respect. So they settle into your life like tenants who never pay rent. They take up space. They consume your energy. They make demands disguised as needs. And when you start to feel resentful, they remind you of how much they're struggling, how hard things are for them, how much they need you. And just like that, you're back in the cycle. Here's the mechanism. They collapse. You catch them. They stabilize just enough to collapse again, over and over. And each time, you convince yourself that this time will be different, that this time they'll finally use the tools you've given them, that this time your effort will mean something lasting. But it won't, because the comfort they gain from your endless availability is greater than the discomfort of staying broken. They benefit from your brokenness, from your inability to let go, from your belief that walking away makes you cruel. They've learned that as long as they stay in crisis, you'll stay in range. And the most painful part, you're starting to resent them. The people you once cared about deeply now feel like weights, obligations, sources of dread. You used to feel good about helping. Now you feel trapped by it. This is what happens when helping becomes a compulsion instead of a choice. But here's what no one told you. You can stop. You can step back. You can withdraw your energy without cruelty, without explanation, without guilt. Not because they're bad people, but because you're not responsible for their survival. Here's the strategy. It's not about confrontation. It's not about big, dramatic exits. It's about something quieter and far more powerful. Withdrawal of effort. For the next 72 hours, go cold, not hostile, not punishing, just unavailable. Stop initiating. Stop checking in. Stop offering solutions. Stop being the first to respond. Let your silence create space where your presence used to be. This will feel uncomfortable. Your nervous system will scream at you. You'll feel guilt. You'll feel selfish. You'll imagine worst-case scenarios. You'll convince yourself that you're abandoning them. But you're not. You're testing a hypothesis. Do they actually need you? Or do they just need someone to manage their discomfort? Watch what happens. Some people will panic. They'll reach out more. They'll guilt you. They'll accuse you of changing. They'll tell you they need you. And when you don't respond the way you used to, they'll escalate. They'll create new crises. They'll remind you of all the times you were there before. This is withdrawal symptoms. Not from you as a person, but from you as a function. Other people won't even notice. They'll move on to the next available support system without a second thought. And that will tell you everything you need to know. about what you actually meant to them. And a very small number, the ones who actually care about you as a person, not just as a resource, will check in with curiosity instead of demand. They'll ask if you're okay. They'll respect your space. They'll show up differently because they recognize something has shifted. Those are the people worth keeping. But here's the second part of the strategy. When you do re-engage, you do it differently. You don't go back to being the person who fixes everything. You show up as someone who listens but doesn't rescue, who cares but doesn't carry, who offers perspective but not solutions unless asked. You stop doing for people what they should be doing for themselves. You stop explaining. You stop over-functioning. You stop making their emotional regulation your responsibility. This will feel selfish at first, but it's not. It's boundaries. It's self-preservation. It's recognizing that your energy is finite, and your time is sacred, and your peace is not negotiable. The third strategy is this. Redefine help. Real help doesn't create dependency. It creates capacity. If your support isn't making someone stronger, it's making them smaller. And if you're doing more work on their problems than they are, you're not helping. You're enabling. So the question becomes, are you helping them grow? Or are you preventing them from having to? Most of the time, it's the latter. And the hardest part is accepting that letting them struggle might be the most loving thing you can do, because struggle builds strength, discomfort forces change, and sometimes people don't choose to stand until sitting becomes unbearable. You've been protecting them from that discomfort, and in doing so, you've robbed them of the only thing that could actually save them, the necessity to save themselves. Here's what changes when you stop. When you pull back your energy and reclaim your time. First, you get quieter. Not because you have less to say, but because you realize how much noise you are making trying to fill other people's silence. You stop feeling the compulsion to fix, explain, convince, or rescue. You just observe. And in that observation, you start to see people clearly. Not as projects, not as potential, but as they actually are. And some of them are exactly who they've always been. People who prefer comfort over change. People who would rather be carried than climb. Second, your energy returns. The heaviness that's been sitting on your chest for months starts to lift. You sleep better. You think clearer. You stop feeling like you're constantly on call for emergencies that never actually resolve. You realize how much of your life you'd outsourced. How many of your own goals you put on hold because you were too busy managing someone else's chaos. How many of your own needs you ignored because theirs always seemed more urgent. Third, you become selective. You stop saying yes to every request for your time your attention, your emotional labor. You start recognizing the difference between people who are in your life because they value you, and people who are in your life because they value what you do for them. And the ones who only valued your function, they disappear quietly, without fanfare, because once you stop performing, they have no reason to stay. And that's okay, because the space they leave behind gets filled with something better. Yourself. Your own thoughts. Your own goals. Your own peace. The person you used to be before you became everyone's emergency contact. You stop measuring your worth by how much you give and start measuring it by how well you protect what matters. Your time, your energy, your boundaries, your right to rest without guilt. This is what reconstruction looks like. Not building someone else up, building yourself back. You'll know you've shifted when someone asks for help, and your first instinct isn't to drop everything. When you can say, "I can't right now," without justifying it. When their crisis doesn't become your crisis. When you can care about someone without feeling responsible for them. This is emotional adulthood. And it's uncomfortable at first, because you've spent so long believing that love means sacrifice, that care means availability, that being good means being endlessly giving. But that's not strength. That's depletion. And you can't pour from an empty cup, not because you shouldn't, but because eventually there's nothing left to pour. So you stop pouring, you stop saving, you stop carrying people who refuse to walk, and you start moving again, lighter, clearer, more deliberate, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about the right person, yourself. You can't save people who find comfort in their own collapse.